Russia has already lost the war, they just don't know it yet. The speeches say victory, the headlines say momentum, but the numbers, they tell a completely different story. Dead troops, destroyed tanks, collapsing supply lines. The data is brutal, and it's stacking up fast. So forget what the Kremlin says. Here's what the war in Ukraine really looks like. In order to do that more accurately, let's rewind the clock to February 2022. When Russian forces launched their full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, they did so with overwhelming numerical superiority across virtually every military metric. Russia's war machine contained approximately 900,000 active military personnel. This was nearly 5 times Ukraine's active force of around just 196,000. This advantage extended even further when considering Russia's massive reserve force of about 2 million soldiers compared to Ukraine's 900,000. The disparity in military hardware was even more pronounced. At the start of the war, Russia's armored forces included approximately 3,400 main battle tanks on active duty, including a significant number in storage, massively outnumbering Ukraine's roughly 990 tanks. Of these, only 800 to 900 Ukrainian tanks were believed to be fully operational. This pattern repeated across all major equipment categories. Russia possessed 30,000 armored fighting vehicles to Ukraine's 12,000, 14,000 artillery systems versus Ukraine's 3,000, and 3,500 multiple rocket launchers compared to Ukraine's modest 600. Furthermore, in most cases, Russia commanded a significant technological advantage in its military equipment. Most of what Ukraine had at the start of the war was inherited from the Soviet Union and dated back to the 1990s. Ukraine had done its best to keep and upgrade its existing systems, but it lacked the economic and industrial capacity to do so, especially when compared to Russia, which had by 2020 become one of the world's largest economies and military manufacturers. Case in point was the state of Ukraine's main battle tanks. The country inherited a fleet of T-64s, a tank that was perhaps obsolete even when the Soviet Union was collapsing, as it was already getting replaced by T-80s in 1976. Ukraine modernized the tanks into the T-64 Bulat model while Russia was fielding T-80s and T-90s. While the Bulat features Contact 5 explosive reactive armor known as ERA, a 125mm smoothbore gun capable of firing guided missiles and upgraded fire control systems, it still fundamentally relies on the older T-64 platform. Its protection and mobility are adequate by regional standards, but the tank suffers from limitations in power-to-weight ratio and crew comfort, especially compared to more modern tanks. The Bulat's enhancement was simply intended to prolong the life of Ukraine's existing tank inventory without investing in entirely new platforms, making it a practical compromise for a nation with a limited defense budget leading up to the war. In contrast, the Russian T-90 series, especially the T-90A and T-90M, represents a more contemporary tank design that benefits from lessons learned from previous models like the T-72 and T-80. The T-90 features advanced fire control systems, thermal imaging, and superior active protection options such as the Shatora 1 or Relict era in the newer T-90M. Its mobility is supported by a more powerful engine, and the tank is designed with a better balance of firepower, protection, and crew survivability. Compared to the Bulat, the T-90M's sensor suite and digital systems give it a significant edge in target acquisition and engagement at longer ranges, making it more effective in modern, networked warfare environments. Of course, other factors, which we'll discuss later, made tanks a slightly less menacing sight on the battlefronts, but it's important to paint a picture of just how much of an advantage Russia supposedly had. Perhaps nowhere was the imbalance more striking than in the skies above Ukraine. Russia's air force entered the conflict with approximately 1,500 combat aircraft and 500 attack helicopters, a staggering 13-to-1 advantage over Ukraine's air force, which could muster only about 116 combat aircraft and 55 attack helicopters. Furthermore, Ukraine once again relied on older Soviet models, which the Russian Federation largely shed for more modern aerial platforms. This air superiority was complemented by Russia's sophisticated air defense networks and electronic warfare capabilities that far exceeded Ukrainian countermeasures. At sea, the disparity was equally dramatic. Russia's Black Sea Fleet alone, with its cruiser, 6 frigates and destroyers and numerous support vessels, outnumbered Ukraine's entire navy of approximately 15 vessels. Russia's naval advantage gave it control of Ukraine's coastline from the war's opening hours, with Ukraine eventually scuttling its flagship frigate rather than risking its capture. What Russia couldn't quantify, however, was the Ukrainian military's 8 years of combat experience in the Donbass since 2014. Additionally, the Ukrainian military had started receiving training from NATO at that time, with the military's strategies and tactics adapting to a more Western combat style. while implementing Ukraine's native equipment. Despite Russia's overwhelming numerical advantages, 4.5 to 1 in personnel, 13 to 1 in aircraft, and decisive edges in every equipment category, these statistics would soon be tested against the stubborn reality of modern combat and Ukraine's resolute defense of its sovereignty. Arguably, Russia failed in the war practically in its opening 3 days. As mentioned, the entire Russian invasion was supposed to last a mere few weeks, not 3 years and counting. The strategy the Russian President Vladimir Putin employed was to transport a small number of highly experienced special troops directly to the Kyiv airport, capture it, and then use it as a staging ground to enter the capital. From then on, the troops would march directly into the government, with Putin's belief that they would experience little to no resistance and capture the current leadership, including Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The plan was a disaster from the start. Former President Joe Biden's administration warned Ukraine that Russia was mounting an invasion, giving the latter ample time to prepare for this type of scenario. After all, it was practically Russia's modus operandi when trying to remove opposition and install puppet governments, to the point that it was used 3 times, twice during the Soviet Union era, and most importantly in Crimea itself in 2014. Ukraine shelled its own largest airport, delaying the Russian troops. This gave the Ukrainian military enough time to regroup, even if it ended up losing the airport later in the afternoon of the first day of the invasion. But the damage was already done. Russia couldn't mount its decapitating strike, the aircraft that were supposed to come as reinforcements were recalled, and the mechanized infantry that started in Belarus was significantly delayed by Ukraine's land forces. And then Russia just kept losing more and more men. Within the first 6 months, by August 2022, US intelligence estimated that Russia had suffered around 80,000 casualties, counting both killed and wounded soldiers. These early losses, driven by miscalculations and fierce Ukrainian resistance, forced the Kremlin to initiate partial mobilizations, primarily targeting reservists and those with prior military experience. However, these efforts faced major public backlash and led to a noticeable outflow of military-aged men seeking to avoid being drafted. This created an additional change in military conscription, now focusing on drafting inmates and even using private militaries as mercenaries. This was still not enough, as by February 2023, the toll had risen sharply. Leaked US intelligence documents revealed that Russia had likely seen between 35,500 and 43,000 soldiers killed in action, with total casualties estimated to be between 189,500 and 223,000. Even a more conservative estimate put the casualty count at over 100,000 losses. This would make the first year of the war in Ukraine the deadliest conflict Russia had been in since World War II, by its duration, easily outpacing the 9-year Soviet-Afghan War, which claimed only 15,000 casualties. Faced with dwindling professional forces, Russia increasingly turned to recruiting civilians by offering high salaries and fast-tracked contracts. Many of these recruits had little or no military experience and were quickly deployed to the front lines with minimal training, raising serious concerns about their effectiveness and survivability. The period from February to August 2023 marked another turning point, as Ukraine expanded its use of drone warfare. US forces estimated Russian casualties to have reached 120,000 killed and up to 180,000 wounded by this point, for a total of 300,000 losses. Ukrainian drones proved devastatingly effective, accounting for an estimated 60 to 70% of destroyed Russian systems. The precision and affordability of these drones made large-scale, conventional Russian offensives increasingly unsustainable. By early 2024, casualties had reached staggering levels. Estimates indicated Russia had suffered up to 211,000 soldier deaths, with total casualties nearing 500,000. The independent news outlet Medusa, analyzing data on confirmed soldiers killed and data retrieved from the Russian probate registry, estimated 75,000 Russian soldiers were killed since the start of the invasion and by the end of 2023. A statistical estimate within a wide range of between 66,000 and 88,000 killed. These were factually confirmed losses based on the registry, and even Medusa admitted that it's likely that Russia had suffered significantly more deaths than reported. Even more conservative estimates of only 250,000 casualties, still multiple times higher than the numbers Russia was reporting at the time, suggested that the Russian losses were accelerating with the war turning into one of attrition. This phase also saw Russia ramp up conscription from economically disadvantaged regions and offer lucrative death benefits as incentives, a tactic dubbed deathonomics. Civilians with little combat experience were increasingly used as cannon fodder in grinding assaults, often against well-defended Ukrainian positions supported by drones, artillery, and precision strikes. In some cases, entire Russian battalions were wiped from the map, while a more successful push would see a casualty rate of only 30 to 40%. By August 2024, Ukrainian drone warfare had become even more dominant, reportedly responsible for up to 80% of Russia's frontline losses. Furthermore, August 2024 was the start of the Ukrainian Kursk invasion, which followed Russia's strikingly ineffective summer invasion, which saw casualty counts surpass 1,200 soldiers per day. The Kursk invasion only accelerated the losses, as Russia was forced to split its forces into invading Donbass and mounting a counteroffensive in Kursk. In mid-October, North Korea got involved and sent 11,000 men to Kursk as part of the Russia-North Korea Defensive Pact. However, these supposed elite troops turned out to be highly ineffective in the wake of Ukrainian drones and longer-range tactics. After nearly 3 months of being pummeled and suffering at least 3,000 casualties, expectations grew that Putin would recall the North Korean troops, but instead 3,000 more were sent. As of March 2025, Russia's total military casualties were estimated to exceed 910,000, according to Ukrainska Pravda, a news outlet almost solely focused on wartime reports. With professional units decimated and contract soldiers dwindling, Putin ordered the conscription of another 160,000 men. Although the Kremlin insisted this draft was routine and unrelated to the war, most observers recognized it as a clear response to persistent battlefield attrition. The war's evolution, marked by Russia's increasingly desperate recruitment and Ukraine's tactical superiority through drones and Western weapons, has turned what was expected to be a swift Russian victory into a war of attrition, exacting a steep toll on Russian manpower and morale. But what about the aforementioned military equipment that Russia boasted? Well, as mentioned, drones were considered the great equalizer in modern warfare, with both Russia and Ukraine creating brand new battalions only focused on drone operations. The skies surrounding the front line were practically abuzz with drone activity. The sheer variety and number of drones meant that practically every major operation undertaken by either side would quickly be spotted by the other. Then, the drones could utilize their superior mobility, when compared to infantry and mechanized units alike, to go deeper into enemy territory and perform precision strikes to cut off any semblance of an advance as soon as it could start. This led to Russia quickly pulling even its older tanks like the T-64s out of storage to bring them to the front line. Unlike the upgraded T-64 Bulats on the Ukrainian side, these were likely only minimally improved to get them operational. Rather than be an active part of the war, these tanks likely represented mere alternative targets, and their losses would mean that a more advanced tank, like the T-90, might potentially eke out a win somewhere on the front if it went unchallenged. But even Russia's more advanced tanks proved to be no match for drones. The supposed next-generation main battle tank, the T-14 Armata, of which Russia has roughly a dozen only, made its debut in mid-2024, only to be quietly recalled from the front mere weeks later. The logistics and economics of utilizing tanks that could cost millions to make and repair didn't make sense when Ukraine fielded first-person view kamikaze drones that could be made for as little as $300, and they can destroy tanks. All of this leads to staggering numbers of military equipment losses. By the end of March 2025, Russia had lost a total of 10,500 main battle tanks, close to 22,000 armored vehicles, over 25,000 artillery systems, whether they were self-propelled or pulled, and over 1,300 multiple rocket launchers. Russia's war in the sky has suffered similar setbacks. While 2024 was considered Russia's best year in terms of territorial gains in the Donbass region, it came with heavy troop casualties, and was also heralded by a sharp increase in military drone usage for both short-range and long-range operations. Unmanned aerial vehicles like the Shahid 136 from Iran would be just one of the many different long-range drones that Russia would launch into Ukraine, with the severity and frequency of the strikes increasing in 2025. Overall, Russia lost over 35,000 unmanned aerial vehicles over the course of the past 3 years. The reports of Shahid and other drone attacks support this estimate. In February 2023, Russia launched just 45 Shahids. By February 2024, this increased to 377. In February 2025, though, Russia launched a massive 3,902 drones in Ukraine. The number of other drones is likely a significant multiple of that, as Russia reportedly increased its production capacity to 1.4 million drones in 2024. All of these drones proved to be unable to create adequate pressure on Ukraine. Even amidst some of the largest drone attacks, Ukraine continued to make significant advances in its own military technology, bolstered by prototypes and new developments from vital NATO members like the UK, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. These countries either adapted existing equipment to better fit the modern warfare model of using long-range artillery and drones, or devised upgrades to mortars or infantry support vehicles that would make them more versatile or effective against drones themselves. But there are a few more aspects of Russian losses that go beyond just the military, but also truly showcase how damaged Russia actually is by this war. Since the onset of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Russia has experienced one of the largest waves of emigration in its modern history. Hundreds of thousands of people, from young professionals and students to IT specialists, engineers, and entrepreneurs, have fled the country. Estimates suggest that over 1 million people may have left Russia by 2024, with particularly large surges following the two major mobilization announcements. Many left not only to avoid conscription, but also to escape the increasing authoritarianism, international isolation, and economic instability triggered by the war. This exodus has stripped Russia of a significant portion of its most educated and economically active population. The economic consequences of this brain drain are already being felt. Russia's labor market is tightening, particularly in sectors that rely on highly skilled workers such as technology, science, and finance. For example, Russia experienced an unprecedented unemployment rate of only 2.4%. While a small unemployment rate is good for a country, a healthy unemployment rate is estimated to be around 4% and up to 6%. This allows the country to have a steady supply of people to fill new job openings and typically counts people currently in between jobs, which points to a competitive market, as companies have candidates to meet their demands. However, the record low unemployment meant that companies suddenly stopped being able to meet their employment quotas. Furthermore, many of the migrants were part of Russia's burgeoning digital economy, fields that are difficult to replenish quickly, especially under global sanctions and restricted access to Western technologies. Small and medium-sized businesses have significantly suffered from the departure of key personnel, stalling innovation and reducing productivity. Demographically, the impact is even more severe. Russia was already grappling with a declining and aging population before the war. The country, much like most of Europe, had a low fertility rate of only 1.8 births per woman, while the required fertility rate for growing the population without immigration is around 2.1. This was further compounded by the country's economic instability in the decade after the Soviet Union's collapse, which saw the fertility rate drop to only 1.2 at the turn of the century. The war has only made the problem more severe, as the country just lost over 100,000 men in the war, and likely even more, and over 1 million people left it. The loss of young, working-age men and women is compounding a crisis that threatens long-term economic growth and the sustainability of state-funded programs such as pensions and healthcare. Many of those who left are unlikely to return in the near future, especially as the war drags on and civil liberties within Russia continue to erode. The state is now left with a shrinking tax base and increasing pressure on public services to support a disproportionately older and less economically productive population. Compounding this demographic hemorrhage are the enormous military losses Russia has suffered. With hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed or wounded, the war has directly removed a sizable portion of the country's workforce. Many of the conscripts came from rural or economically disadvantaged areas, where the loss of able-bodied men has deepened existing social and economic divides. In many regions, families have lost not just breadwinners, but future generations of workers. The psychological and economic burden on communities, particularly where male populations have been decimated, will be long-lasting. Furthermore, the casualty count of 910,000 includes both killed and wounded. Both of these types of losses directly strain the Russian economy. Due to increased incentives for recruits, Russia needs to pay out more and more to the families of the deceased, and even for soldiers who survive their wounds, chances are they're going to need lifelong social assistance from the government. The combined effect of mass emigration and battlefield casualties is a profound weakening of Russia's human capital and productive capacity. In the long term, this dual loss may lead to stagnation or decline in key industries, hamper innovation, and severely limit the country's ability to compete globally. Even as the government attempts to plug labor shortages through conscription or increased automation, the foundational problem remains. Russia is losing the very people it needs to rebuild and modernize its economy. And the effect on the Russian economy is even worse when you account for the changing wartime spending and Russia's need to practically overhaul its trading patterns. Western sanctions that began immediately after the invasion in 2022 cut off Russia from key international financial systems, restricted access to advanced technologies, and heavily limited its ability to trade with traditional partners in Europe and North America. In response, Russia pivoted toward countries like China, India, and Iran, increasing energy exports to these nations. However, these alternative markets often negotiated steep discounts, reducing the potential revenue from one of Russia's most vital income sources, oil and gas. While Russia's economy arguably bounced back, maintaining a 3.6% growth throughout 2023, it's highly misleading when compared to the actual state of affairs. This is due to the country spending more and more on its military. In 2025, more than 40% of Russia's annual budget seems to be devoted to the military and other secret projects. In total, Russia would likely end up spending 6.3% of its GDP on national defense, a figure unseen in the country since the height of the Cold War. In contrast, the US spent only 3.36% of its GDP on its military in 2023. The increased spending on the war means that Russia's economy is effectively propped up by its inefficient trade in gas and oil, which itself is conducted largely illegally, and then a large portion of it is being used to continue the war effort. In the meantime, traditional domestic manufacturing and agriculture will suffer manpower and budgetary shortages. In essence, Russia's betting that it can end the war before the long-term ramifications of going all in on it start to show, likely in only a few years. However, with Europe stalwartly backing Ukraine at every turn over the past few months, the war might not end in 2025, at least not in Russia's favor. If Russia ends up losing, it would likely be forced to pay reparations, which would create yet another economic outflow the country isn't prepared for in the slightest. Ultimately, win or lose, Russia might not survive as the country that it used to be. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments, and thank you, as always, for watching.